Sarah had lived in her quaint suburban home for over a decade. Nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac, it was a place where she had watched her family grow, where her children played in the yard, and where she felt the safety and comfort of a peaceful neighborhood. That all changed the moment the Homeowners Association, HOA, decided to enforce their rules in a manner that felt more like oppression than oversight. The HOA was a shadow that loomed over many of the residents, but Sarah had always been able to fly under the radar. The community was known for its strict regulations, rules about the color of fences, the height of grass, and even the precise angle at which a car should be parked in the driveway. It was an unspoken agreement that as long as you followed the basics, you could enjoy your home in peace. But recently, it had become clear that things were changing. One day, Sarah received a letter from the HOA. It stated that she had violated several community rules and regulations. The first issue was with her fence, which was deemed to be too high. Sarah had built the fence a few years ago to give her children some privacy while they played in the backyard, and she had carefully followed the guidelines set out by the HOA. Now, they were claiming it was too high. The letter was filled with legal jargon, and while the violations were listed, none of them seemed to make sense. A second issue was the state of her lawn. It had a few dandelions, which, to Sarah's knowledge, were not a problem for anyone else. And lastly, her house's exterior color, which was a warm beige, had been flagged for not adhering to the HOA's earth tone rule, despite the fact that the entire neighborhood had homes painted in various shades of beige, cream, and taupe. The letter ended with a warning: correct the violations within 10 days or face fines and further actions. Sarah was taken aback. She had always been a responsible homeowner, and her family took pride in their property. She called the HOA's office, but the response was dismissive. The woman on the other end of the line explained that the rules were clear and that the board had decided to enforce them strictly from now on. Feeling helpless and frustrated, Sarah realized she had no choice but to comply. But the more she thought about it, the more she began to question the HOA's motives. It seemed like they were looking for any excuse to penalize her. She was no longer just a resident, she was becoming the target of a relentless force that cared more about arbitrary rules than the well-being of its community. A week later, Sarah was startled when she received a notice from the HOA informing her that one of the board members, Karen Foster, would be coming to inspect her property. Karen was notorious in the neighborhood, an overzealous HOA enforcer who made it her personal mission to ensure every home in the community was in full compliance with the HOA's regulations. Many of the neighbors had clashed with her, but none had dared to stand up to her authority. When Sarah saw the notice, her gut sank. Karen had a reputation for being rude and invasive. Sarah had heard horror stories of Karen knocking on doors without notice, forcing entry into people's homes, and making demands that were not legally enforceable. She feared the same would happen to her. The letter warned Sarah that Karen would be arriving at a specific time, giving her a short window of opportunity to correct the alleged violations. However, Sarah had no intention of letting Karen into her house without knowing exactly what she was dealing with. She had tried to reach out to the HOA multiple times to clarify the situation, but their answers were vague and unhelpful. The more she tried to comply, the more she felt like she was being set up to fail. In a moment of frustration, Sarah made a decision. She would set up hidden cameras around her property to document everything that happened when Karen arrived. She wasn't sure if it was necessary, but after hearing stories of Karen's aggressiveness, Sarah felt it was the only way to protect herself. If Karen had any intention of breaking the law or intimidating her, Sarah would have the evidence to expose it. The day Karen was scheduled to arrive, Sarah hid several cameras in key spots around the yard and inside her home. She was nervous but determined. She didn't want to escalate the situation, but she was ready to stand up for herself. She had no idea what was coming. As Sarah watched Karen's relentless intrusion, something inside her clicked. She felt violated. Her personal space, her home, and her privacy had all been invaded without her consent. The feeling of helplessness gave way to a burning desire for justice. She knew that Karen had overstepped her bounds, and she had evidence to prove it. After Karen finally left, Sarah immediately rushed to the hidden cameras and started reviewing the footage. What she saw made her blood boil. Karen's actions were more than just an overzealous inspection, they were an outright invasion of Sarah's home. The footage clearly showed Karen entering through an unlocked door, ignoring Sarah's requests to leave, and even damaging property. In the recordings, Sarah could hear Karen's dismissive comments, and her sense of entitlement was apparent as she went about her invasive duties. The footage was damning. But Sarah knew that evidence alone wouldn't be enough, she needed to take action. This wasn't just about the fence or the lawn, it was about standing up to an unchecked authority and ensuring that no one else had to endure this kind of treatment. The decision was made. Sarah uploaded the video footage online, knowing that her story might resonate with others who had been harassed by similar HOA figures. She shared the link on social media, making sure to add a powerful caption detailing what had happened. The post quickly went viral. People from all over the country began to share their own experiences with overbearing HOA members. The community rallied behind Sarah, praising her for standing up to the injustice. Support poured in, and it wasn't long before local news outlets took notice. Sarah's story became a sensation. Headlines like HOA Karen breaks into home, caught on camera, and homeowner exposes HOA member for violating her privacy began circulating. The attention from the media placed even more pressure on the HOA and Karen, who now had no choice but to respond. But Karen wasn't ready to back down. She attempted to defend herself in public interviews, claiming that she was merely doing her job. However, the video footage told a different story. The community, which had once turned a blind eye to the HOA's heavy-handed tactics, was now demanding accountability. It wasn't just about Karen anymore. People realized that the HOA was a powerful institution that often abused its power. Sarah's case became a symbol of the overreach that many residents had quietly endured for years. The viral video had given a voice to those who had been silenced by fear of retribution from their HOA. The situation escalated quickly. The media storm surrounding Karen's actions led to an official investigation. Sarah, knowing that her case had gained so much attention, contacted the local authorities and submitted the footage as evidence. She was determined to make sure that Karen faced the consequences of her actions. The police began to investigate Karen's behavior. At first, Karen tried to downplay the situation, insisting that she had simply been enforcing the HOA's rules. But the evidence was undeniable. The hidden cameras had captured every detail. Karen had entered Sarah's home without permission, made damaging decisions about the property, and, most shockingly, had physically altered things in the yard. When the police called Karen in for questioning, she tried to explain herself, but she had no legal ground to stand on. The law was clear: she had violated Sarah's privacy by entering her home without consent and had caused property damage. The authorities had enough to charge her with unlawful entry, trespassing, and vandalism. Sarah's lawyer presented the footage in court, and the case quickly became a matter of public interest. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, was clear in their ruling: Karen's actions were unacceptable, and she would be held accountable for her overreach. The HOA was ordered to pay restitution for the damages caused, and Karen was fined and removed from her position on the board. As the court proceedings played out, Karen's reputation crumbled. She had been so sure of her power, but in the face of the law and overwhelming public opinion, she had been brought down. The story had taken on a life of its own, and Karen was now a cautionary. The victory in court wasn't just Sarah's, it was a victory for everyone who had suffered at the hands of tyrannical HOA members. The case sent a powerful message: homeowners had the right to defend themselves against intrusive and unlawful behavior. The support Sarah received from the community during this time gave her the strength to press on, and she became an advocate for those who felt powerless in the face of HOA overreach. The HOA itself faced a massive backlash. The board had been forced to reassess its policies and implement more transparent, fair practices. There was a call for better accountability, and a new initiative to protect homeowners from undue harassment was set into motion. The story of Karen's unlawful actions sparked a broader conversation about homeowners' rights and the unchecked power of some HOA members. Sarah, now a symbol of resilience, was approached by several other homeowners who had experienced similar issues with their own HOAs. she became a vocal advocate for reform, speaking out at local meetings and sharing her story to empower others. As for Karen, she faded into obscurity, her career in the HOA shattered. But the real winner was Sarah. She had not only secured justice for herself but had ignited a movement that would ensure future homeowners wouldn't have to suffer the same fate. Looking back, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It wasn't just the victory in court that mattered. It was the realization that sometimes, standing up to injustice required more than just fighting for your own rights. It required speaking out for those who couldn't speak for themselves. And that, she knew, was worth every moment of the BA.